Agenda. Next up, we have review and approval of minutes for August 20th, 2018, regular meeting and work session. If everybody's had a chance to review those, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Motion?
And a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Eddie.
Mr. Flores, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Next up this evening is consideration and approval of our agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve our agenda as presented.
So move.
We've got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, we've approved our agenda this evening. And then next up tonight is information and presentations. These are non-action items, program presentations. And first up this evening is Leslie Schertz, the Director of Nursing for Silver Schools. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. Chair and board members. How are you doing?
Really well.
In 2016, the state of New Mexico for the schools passed a naloxone administration protocol, and part of that, it's statewide, but also for us to have it here in the Silver Schools, we have to have a district policy. So that's what you see before you in your packets is a district policy for the administration of naloxone by school personnel. Naloxone, also known as Narcan, reverses opioid overdoses. It's apparent, safe to give, and it reverses very quickly, and there's step-by-step guidelines on administration, and the nurses would have it within their school lock boxes, and then they would be teaching people how to administer it. So I know this is first read. Do you have any questions for me or anything?
I just know on the policy it said that they had to undergo appropriate training.
Yes.
And I was wondering when that's going to occur and how much it costs.
The training will be done by me.
Okay.
And it's a step-by-step, it's an easy form. The state has the guidelines on the training, and it's very straightforward, simple. You know, you give your one dose, and then, you know, you already activated EMS, and you make sure that they go ahead and transport, because as you know, that reverses back within 30 minutes if it's a true opioid overdose. So I would be doing the training. I would check off my nurses, and then the nurses would go and check off the people that would also might have access to that. You know, maybe the secretary or the coaches or someone like that. So that would be free.
Nice.
Well, not really free.
As free as it can be.
Question I have is, it kind of sounded like, do we already have the medication on hand, and it's just a matter of doing the training and dispensing it?
Yes, we do have the medication on hand. We need to have a policy in place for it to be, as Mr. Cluck was saying, T's crossed and dotted I's. So, and the nurses have been, you know, trained, but it hasn't been official. You know, we need to go through the checklist, but it is in place right now. There was a state push in 2017 to have it in the schools, and we just need the policy to follow the state policy for the procedures.
The other question or concern, I guess, kind of / concern that I have is, because we're members of the School Board Association Policy Services, do you know if this has been run by them or sent to them for evaluation as well? Or Mr. Brown?
It has
you know?
not yet.
Okay.
Once we get it approved by you folks, then that's something we will send on. And he can make any necessary adjustments, if any.
Okay.
And I vaguely remember whenever we were adopting, there was a drug that the policy services told us not to adopt that policy. And I don't know if it was this one,
I
but it was
believe
just last year.
I believe it was EpiPens.
Right. EpiPens now are carried by the students.
Okay.
Or if they're in elementary school, then the school nurse. But the EpiPen was a big issue a couple of years ago.
Okay.
So, but as far as having a school policy for EpiPens.
Okay.
And then I guess maybe my recommendation would be is we can have this as a first reading tonight, and then maybe we send it to policies, services, have them review it for any,
It's a great idea.
I guess, red flags or,
Certainly.
I mean, we can, I believe we can certainly adopt any policy we want to as a board, but I think since we're members of that service, it's any policies, whether that we draft here or are recommended, that we kind of funnel it through them for a review as well.
Correct.
But any other questions from the board?
How long does the train, you have to administer the training, so is it annually? How good are?
Once.
I would say
Just once?
once, unless you had a turnover of the school nurse, whoever the school nurse trained, but, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's not something that has to be refreshed.
We were trained as law enforcement, and the training lasted probably no less, just an hour or two of that. But yeah, it can't be any more straightforward than what they tell you. Pretty much just identify and put in the nose and squeeze. And I know they did tell us so that I think it has an expiration, a shelf life
Right.
of a few years, so it has to be recycled at some point, and we can't leave it in our car because it's sensitive to extreme heat or extreme cold,
Right.
so we have to watch that. But I know law enforcement in the area has been trained, so there was an OD, and law enforcement's the first responder
The
there.
first responders.
They're equipped
yeah,
with an Narcan.
Right. And there's pharmacies that will supply the Narcan to the schools for free.
Oh, nice.
So, well, it's, as you know, it's saving lives,
Yeah.
if it came to that.
Lots of them in New Mexico.
Yeah.
Have we had any situations where this would have been helpful?
No,
Okay.
not, well,
Not
how can I
yet.
say that? Because I've only been here 4 weeks. As far as I know, none of the school nurses have reported to me
Okay.
that they had ever used the Narcan. But if, for that one case,
Yes,
there would be.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess next on, do we have that next on our agenda is a first reading? Is that right?
That's correct.
So we've got those documents that are attached to everybody's board book. It should be the policy administration in sewer schools, the NARCON purpose, the NARCON standing order, and the, I guess, order signed PDF for a first reading this evening. And then we'll send those, hopefully we can get some feedback from New Mexico School Board Policy Services on these policies before our second reading and approval next month.
And I guess my only question from a legal perspective is, I know in the setting where it's emergency kind of life-saving measures, you take whatever measures need be, and there's no need for parental consent, that kind of thing. But I think we just need to make sure they look at it from that perspective too. But from a medical perspective, usually if it's a life-saving situation where the priority is the well-being of the person, and it's a life-saving measure, then you don't require any kind of parental consent in that setting.
And I guess maybe that's maybe an additional question I have on the standing order, that there's a Christopher Novak, who is the Northwest Region acting RHO. Then there's, I guess ours would be the Southwest Region, Eugene. Is that Marcinak is the signing off on the standing orders? Mrs. Schertz, does that sound correct?
Yeah, that's what I
Okay.
have.
And that was in 16, so I think that would need to be updated annually, the standing orders?
I couldn't find the updating one. This is the one that I found within the school, New Mexico Health School Manual. That's
Okay.
where I-
That's the most current one that you
Yes.
could find?
yes.
Okay.
Are those still the people in those
Open.
positions?
In those positions? That might be something that we can investigate as well, is see if they're updated annually, if those are the same individual that would be signing off for our region.
Yeah.
Because I think, at least in my instance, I have standing orders that are reviewed annually.
Well, and making sure it's still that person in that position and
Would
even,
be good to do as well. Okay. Anything else on this item before we move on? Very well. Next, under program presentations is the SCEA. Welcome, Ms. Bustillos.
Hello. In looking forward, we met with both Mr. Brown and Mr. Clough last week to talk about some of the things that we're working on. And one of those things is a training for building representatives, but they are now called association representatives, to help us put in place members of our association of SCEA to listen to employees when it's needed. And so Mr. Coker over at the high school offered, when Mary Lou asked, to use the library to have our training. So we'll have several of our members there, along with our state president, NEA New Mexico, Miss Betty Patterson, who will be joining us for this. So we're really looking forward to that. We are also looking forward to getting back to the bargaining table that had been left open because of the transitions between the associate superintendents. So we're looking forward to reigniting that and finishing that up before we move on to our other needs and things like that regarding the collective bargaining agreement. And I think for right now, all is well. So we're good. Any questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Next on our agenda this evening is information to the board, and first up, Superintendent Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd just like to give a brief update on the armed security situation. As you will recall, we were scheduled to attend a CES presentation on September 13th in Las Cruces. Well, that meeting was postponed, and it has not been rescheduled yet. They're thinking that it's going to be sometime in the first week, is what they're shooting for, of October. So I don't have any new information to share regarding participating with CES. There are several other districts that are looking at providing armed security guards within their districts, and so it's an item that is on top of everybody's mind, especially at the beginning of the school year. And so that's where we are at this point. Just wanted to give a brief update with that.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Very well. Next on your updates is potential capital outlay projects.
Again, Mr. President, members of the board, and community members, some potential projects for capital outlay funds. In visiting with Mr. Potts and Mr. Ward, we're looking at possible new scoreboards at the Ben Altamirano Fields, which would be a total of 6 if we're able to do so. And while I'm on the topic, I would encourage you all to go take a look at the work that has been done at the Ben Altamirano Fields. I think everybody will be pretty impressed. It's work that's been needed for some time. And so I'm glad to say that Mr. Ward and his department has done a very good job in doing what they can to help prolong the life of our fields out there. Secondly, we're looking at potentially getting a new scoreboard at the high school. That is something, of course, that's been needed for many years. It's been there since I was playing, for goodness sakes, and that's a long time ago. Third is recreational upgrades to the Altamirano area, for example, picnic tables, barbecue, grills, things of that nature. Something that would be accessible and used by the community, needless to say. We believe this is something that would be well received. And fourthly would be a backhoe for the maintenance department. We saw where Hurley was able to get one, and our folks could definitely use one as well. And so that is something else that they're looking at. And receiving an email this afternoon from Ms. Priscilla Lucero, something that we might also consider as additional funding for any kind of security needs throughout the district as well. So that's all the information that I have at this time.
Questions or comments from the board?
Do you have price estimates on any of those potential capital outlay projects?
No, ma'am, I do not.
Okay.
I guess the question I have is how should we move forward as a district on maybe putting forward all of these items or some of the items for a request for capital outlay? What are your thoughts on that?
It is, from my understanding, the meeting is going to take place for presentation to our legislators on, is it the 17th, if I recall correctly, of October?
For the prospectors?
The Grant County Prospectors, yes. And so I'm not going to be here myself, but Mr. Clough will be, and he's going to be representing the district on that. He's going to be meeting with Mr. Ward and Mr. Potts if Mr. Potts has got anything that he believes needs to be put in the mix as well. And so by that time, we should have some rough ideas of the costs that would be projected. And we're going to put it out there, and with the excess funding, if that's a proper way to say it, that the state has now, we're going to ask for our fair share and see if they will fund it. If they do, great. If they don't, we'll just move forward with what we get.
I think that's probably a great idea is to get some feedback from that workshop on maybe how to best approach it and talking or in just seeing these items. Right now, I'm thinking probably the scoreboards and maybe even the upgrades to Altamirano could all be kind of lumped into one request. Seem to make sense, and then have equipment needs, whether it be a backhoe or a backhoe and anything else as a second request might make a lot of sense, and as opposed to lumping them all together and kind of putting together kind of like items or items that are at least in the same location might be a good idea. But I think getting some feedback from that workshop would be helpful. Because the money's there with the state, and like I said, if we don't ask, they're probably not going to give it to us. And the security request, I think they'll probably kick that to the application, that funding that's already been allocated, and see what happens from that. So I don't feel real strongly about a security request, but again, maybe some feedback from the workshop, and then putting together one or two requests from the district. And I like these ideas because Altamirano is something that not just the district uses, but the community uses. And so
Absolutely.
getting some buy-in from the town, I think, won't be hard. And so I like the items that are there.
Yes, sir. It'd be
Are there-
worthwhile.
Other comments or questions?
The only other thing that I would say, since you were saying like the backhoe to lump like things together, I know Michelle mentioned that our fleet is aging, so I don't know if that's something else to consider, if it's even worth. And she didn't really specify if it was Suburbans or buses or what she was saying, but I guess in her opinion, there is some need there too. So I don't know.
We can certainly request vehicles as well, absolutely.
All I could do is say no.
That's right.
And we're used to that. Oh, sarcasm there.
All right, other comments or questions for Mr. Brown's update to the board? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Next on our agenda is Mr. Clough.
Thank you, Mr. President, board members, community. I have two quick informational items for you, one on the agenda and one that wasn't finalized till after the agenda was released on Friday. As was sent out in the correspondence earlier, the district is entering into a community dialogue process to talk to our partners about aligning graduation requirements for the class of 2022. I'm proud to announce that we have the date finalized as October 10th from 11 to 2 o'clock out at the Grant County Convention Center. Scott Terry in the Chamber of Commerce is hosting that for us. And Western New Mexico Communications has graciously volunteered to cover the luncheon that will be provided for that day. And right now we have 19 confirmed participants in a short period of time, with a possible of another 18 that have committed to look at attending it. So we could have 37 representatives of government, business and industry, other school partners like Western New Mexico is committed to the process. So that'll start on October 18th, so we start talking to the needs of the workforce development for the region, so we start aligning our career and technical education programs for the district to the local needs, so we try to keep our best and brightest in Grant County, which we all know is an issue, trying to keep them there. But though there'll be more information coming forward, because the next step in the process is to do a discussion with the community to inform them of the new changes, as well as what we are looking as a district to provide as career and technical education offerings to our students, which is an exciting time because many of the administrators have expressed a great interest in doing this, and it seems like a lot of our Freeport McMoran grants will be going towards career and technical education this year in the initial meeting I had with staff. So I want to keep the board apprised of that as we move forward. I'll let you know next steps, because we may eventually have to come forward with the approval of some of these. So now we got the final guidance. Mr. Brown forwarded it to me right at the first week of September on what's allowed and not allowed. And it gives the districts a lot of latitude to determine what the needs of kids are, which I'm excited about to be a part of. So I'll keep the board informed on that. Second, enrollment update. As of Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock, yes, Michelle.
October
question.
18th, 11 to 2?
October 10th,
October, okay.
yeah.
I thought I put, okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
10th, 11 to 2. So
Okay.
if one or two of you want to attend, we will have space. I just have to confirm by October 1st with the caterer, so we make sure we have enough food and not have anybody angry leaving. So that way, so if you're interested, please let me know. We have space. We've allotted about 5 spaces for the district. 2 of them are taken by Mr. Brown and myself. So we can go from there. I think we may have up to 7 if Western New Mexico Communications tells me what we can do. So
Can we
we'll
just
be
show
fine.
up last minute?
What?
Can we just show up if we have
You may not be able to eat because it may
That's
be
okay.
gone by the time you get there, Michelle.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that'll be fine. We can
Okay.
talk about it. If you want to take it offline, we can talk about that and with that, because we will order a few, because we will have some people last minute that may not be able to commit to like the few days before, and I've already got arrangements with the caterer to make sure that we can cover that in case that happens. So, second, enrollment numbers. As of Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock when they were ran, K through 12 enrollment was 2437, with pre-K being 62. So our total enrollment as of now is 2499. So that's it. And we also know we're still going through the screening process for pre-K. In the grant, we are not able to turn away anybody that qualifies in there. And I know our psychology department is doing the assessments of the students, see if they qualify for pre-K. So hopefully they're trying to get that, try to be wrapped up by early October, and see as they go. But we do have a waiting list still at the middle school, or at the pre-K building, with regards to that. And our K through 12 enrollment is slightly up from the end of last year, where it was at. So that's a good sign. But the thing that we look at, if you look at where we're at last year for the 40, 80, and 120 day counts at the beginning of the year, we're down from where we were at last year at this time, slightly. We're probably down, if I remember correctly, about 40 kids. But as you always say in the 40-day count in New Mexico, those are imaginary numbers of students. Once you get the cleaning of records and like that, and the 80 and 120 are the ones that really matter. So, and plus with the addition of our new position to board approved, we're sending that person through training. So I think that will help clean up some of the problems we've had with STARS reporting in the past, because some of those numbers will be actual real time, because we'll be able to stay on top of withdrawals and transfers and all that stuff a lot better than having building secretaries take care of it. So I think that process will be a lot cleaner, so we'll have a lot cleaner numbers in the future of our enrollments and accuracy. So if anybody has any questions on the enrollment numbers, I'd be happy to talk.
Do we get to count the 62?
That is separate funding through a grant.
Yeah.
So we do get grant funding that's matched by them.
Okay.
I can't remember, I wasn't here when I wrote the grant, but from what I understood is we capped it at 70 or 75 was the initial projections, Mr. Brown, somewhere in that neighborhood. But there's a provision in the grant that we cannot turn away anybody that qualifies. So we were so worried that we get to the 75 in there, then all of a sudden we have 15 more kids show up with the facility. What do we do with them? Because we have a ratio of 12 or 15 to 1, depending on whether it's a SPED classroom or a pre-K classroom, of what we'd have to do. And then we have to buy additional aids and like that from the grant to be able to cover those things. But that is actually separate funding that we maintain as part of that, and we have to re-up for that every year.
Okay. So I was under the impression that we were down still about 100. So you're just saying you're kind of you're projecting forward?
Yeah.
Pretty much, just
Yeah.
to be a modest estimate.
Yeah,
forward.
modest estimate right now.
Okay.
So we could be down, but we're still playing to shuffle in and out. We just had two people, we just got requests for transfers in and one for transfer out that I was aware of today. So we still have that going on.
Okay.
So, okay?
Question on enrollment that I've wondered in the past with on those count days of 80 and
Yeah,
120.
yeah.
If there's field trips or school activities, those kids are still counted as present, right? That's not necessarily.
As long as it's a school recognized event, yes.
Okay.
Last year, I'll give you an example. On our 40 and 80 day count, we actually had our volleyball and football teams out on those dates, which is about 55 of my kids in Crown Point, and they happen to hit on the basketball tournaments where our girls and guys are out in there. Yeah, but as long as the schools and we recognize and report it correctly, put the right code on it, it's fine. So it's school recognized events are part of that.
Right. You know, I'm even wondering if we should do like some sort of incentive. Show up today and every kid gets a donut or something. Or
That has been talked about. I've done that in prior schools. I don't know what Mr. Brown did at Estancia or like that, but I know when I was back in Ohio as the superintendent, we had a pizza party for any kid during count week. We had a count week, not just a count day in Ohio. Anybody who was there all 5 days, we had a pizza party, and we left school out at 1 o'clock early release on Fridays because you're allowed to do that up to 2 hours. So I don't know how that flies in New Mexico, but we were very creative when it came to those weeks. It's amazing the number of kids that would show up for free pizza. That's all I got to say.
When was our 40-day? Was that just Friday?
No, it's coming up in October. I can't remember the exact date.
So it's not too late?
No, it's not too late. So we want to look at something.
I think it's.
We can talk to them.
I kind of joke about it, but I think it's worthwhile trying to at least make people aware of the
Yes.
date. And
Yeah.
if we can do something to incentivize, because and I don't know what the rules are. I'm guessing it's if you're present at 10 in the morning, then you're good for the day or something like that. But something where we can incentivize the kids and the parents to
be there.
get out of bed and show up.
Yeah.
We sent Mr. Holguin out with the truancy wagon to pull them all in. No, I'm just kidding on that one. We actually did have a conversation with Mr. Holguin about some of the attendance incentives and how they worked at the beginning of the year for some of that. But I know that with limited funding like that, we have to be creative. But we can have a discussion with our administrators to see what they would be willing to do. Like even if they would give an extra recess or something. I mean, that's something that really doesn't cost us money. I mean, we could look at some other things to do that. We're incentivizing a kid coming to school and getting out of class an extra 15 minutes, but sometimes it does do the world of good. Yeah.
I was gonna say.
It converts into dollars.
Have a pep assembly or something.
Pep assembly.
Yeah.
Even have an educational movie night. I mean, when I was back in Ohio, we did some of those things. The kids here had guest speakers during that week, bring a guest speaker in that week. But for high school kids, I know a guest speaker gives them another reason to cut class as they do it. But elementary kids, it might actually work. I mean, we can look at some things that are there that we could bring up to our administrative team and see if they're interested in what they could do and not do.
We could even split it though, right? We could say like elementary extra
Yeah.
recess, secondary out at 1 on Friday.
Yeah.
You gotta come
We can
to
shoot
school until whatever that.
And I think our
attendance
teachers would be
deadline is.
for that because they get an extra 2 hours planning, right, Kat?
Every month. Elementary teachers get
So we can go from there.
Another question or a couple of questions I have on the freshman. Do you say that it was
Great. Yeah, alternative demonstrations
Graduation?
of competency for graduation.
that was just approved recently?
They just released. I haven't gone in depth into the handbook because I've been too busy dealing with the other, or going into the manual of that, and because I've been busy doing other things. But looking at it, they do have some guidelines that we have to follow with regards to the manual, and that manual for this portion is probably, I think, 37 pages. And anytime you try to read through those manuals, you got to make sure. But it does give us a lot of flexibility to determine what we can do. And I think the best part about it is they're not solely relying on PARCC tests for a kid to demonstrate competency. They're going to look at other things such as joining the military, being enrolled in an apprenticeship program, or a recognized on-the-job training program. And if we align what we do as a district, it's our responsibility to make sure we're aligned to nationally recognized credentials and standards in those industries. And if, let's say, if they walk out of here with a complete Microsoft or Cisco networking certificate, and they meet the other graduation requirements as set forth, they take the PARCC once, and we can, as a district, as long as we have it approved by the board, that they can graduate. So we just got to make sure we follow the mechanics of what that is, because Mr. Brown and I were on the original phone call with that when they brought it up. They were very vague until the manual came out, and now the manual's out. The one thing I do not like about it is they still are stressing AP and dual enrollment as the only pathways to success. And I disagree with that because I brought this up to Dr. Diaz. When you can have a welder get $60,000 with one credential leaving high school, and they're making double what our starting teachers do that go to 4 years and accumulate a debt, that's a skill that's very highly needed in this region. With regard, I talked to the mines and I talked to the energy companies, and they keep talking about the lack of welders, lack of electricians, lack of HVAC people in this region. So I'm going to look into that a little bit more and get some clarification on what we can do. But there's some apprenticeship programs we can adopt in areas that will allow us to have kids get those credentials and be able to graduate.
Can I ask a question on that? So with the, excuse me, with us accepting some other form of requirement, do we receive funding for kids that pass PARCC? I mean, is any of our funding tied to that? Because if we're going to take an alternative route for these students, would that affect our funding?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
No.
There's been no mention of
It's
that.
a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question, though.
That is not the case.
Now, the question that I have written down to ask on the next teleconference when they have this is will this affect the current school grading system? And how is it going to shift to meet the needs?
Which does affect
if you're going away from PARCC results to this, or you're going to look at those alternative demonstrations of competency as a person passing PARCC? Because right now, we all play the game. I mean, all the school districts know how to play that game and look at growth and look at improvement. If that kid's only required to take the PARCC once, how's that going to impact the school's grade? Because right now they have multiple. What's the role of EOCs in all this? Because I have this feeling, looking at the manual, they're still going to have to pass the end of course exams in these areas and show that they're competent in those areas. And are you going to do it from a state recognized one, or are you going to use a national credential that you could use? Because there's companies out there like Precision Exams and Certiport, that's their job. They align everything in NOCTI to those types of credentials. But on the other hand, if we have state and local requirements, like for example, our apprenticeship programs in electrical here meet the state requirements, but may not necessarily align to all the national industry standard recognized, because mining electrician is a little bit different than your residential electrician, and an industrial electrician is different than all three of them. So are we going to be that industry specific, or are we just going to look at electrical work as one area? So those are things we got to work through in the manual to see what they're meaning and making sure we're aligning. And the other part of this process, I forgot to mention to the board, is we are surveying our students on their interests. Grades 7 through 12, we'll be sending out an elementary survey here in the next couple of weeks, 5 and 6, to see if they want to be anything other than a lawyer, an actor, or a football player at that age. Just have them get exposed to this sooner so they know what careers are there and they can start thinking about it, because part of this initiative is we've also had discussions with Western New Mexico to expand our dual enrollment offerings in the technical, in the applied technology area and computer and business areas, and also having them look at education as a pathway for our kids, even though it's not a high one on there, but it's a high need for the region. So Western New Mexico is open to having discussions on how to adapt their education program to get kids in K through 12 more exposed to it and be able to be more successful if they choose to go into the education field. So we have all that going on right now to do this, and we're trying to bring it all together in a cohesive plan that meets our area needs as well as our district goals to get our kids graduated.
I think that sounds great, because you're getting the community/business input. I think getting input from the kids themselves is good. So we can better, I guess, put together a plan that people are going to be interested in pursuing. And also in regards to education and the ties that our district and Western have together, strengthening that, because that's primarily, I think, was Western's objective when they were started, was as a teacher's college. And so I like all those ideas, and that we try and strengthen those. And
we're not going to be doing all this at once, Mr. President. We're going to do it like a gradual phasing of things and making sure we're setting our priorities. And I mean, I said this last week. I met with Dr. Crocker and Dr. Manzanares, who's our applied tech. Our top 3 right now, based on roughly about 85 kids have been surveyed in the last couple of weeks. We're trying to get to 300 of the 7 through 12 students. They make it very reliable. If we get to 200, it's reliable. But if you get 300, that's really a good return rate that give you a fair assessment. Right now, the top 3 are, our number 1 is the applied trades, our welding and that program in automotive are number 1 on the list, because we got a lot of kids who are enrolled in those programs. But number 2 and number 3 kind of shocked me, but it shouldn't. Number 2 is business management and entrepreneurship. But when I looked at the results, and a lot of them were saying, well, we're an arts community, we want to start our own business in art, or we want to start our own business in machine trades or whatever. So they're being very entrepreneurial in business management. And the third one, you figured allied health would be up there, but it actually got beat out by technology, which I kind of figured being the top 3, but I figured allied health or applied health technologies would be up there. But that actually was 4th. But I think that's partly because we have a lot of 8th graders and 9th graders that have taken the survey right now. We haven't got a lot of the upperclassmen yet. They may not know what that field is yet. So we'll take that information out of there and figure out how we can do career pathways and career education and career exposure too, because part of this process is also asking the businesses what they can do for us to get our kids exposed sooner. Freeport McMoran offered to us to have the ability of our kids to go out and see the mines or the industrial things. I mean, they need a whole bunch of diesel mechanics, and they made sure when we went to the community panel last week that they knew they needed diesel mechanics for their industry, with them building that new road across into Chino mine. I mean, so, and they try to maintain all their equipment on site so they don't have to ship it out and get it fixed, because it's more costly for them to do that, to ship it when those things weigh God knows how much, I can't remember. He said the number one, the tires are as big as this room on some of those vehicles. And you get a blow out of that, and it can blow up to a quarter of a mile to half a mile when it goes out. That kind of tells you what they're looking at. So, and they have a huge need for electricians out there, and they also need office workers and computer people. I mean, they keep talking about that over and over again. We're not just a mining. We do run full businesses, and they have that. They need assurance adjusters and all those stuff out there too, as they work through their problems with their mine as well. And BPM, who we had, or PNM, who we've had a discussion with as well, is talking about their line people. They're also talking about need of office staff and like that, where they get into company and start grow and learn. So we're not just talking about high skill and low skill jobs. We're looking at all types of jobs and at medium skill level too that kids may want to get into and move in. Not many high school graduates I know can go in and make $80,000 a year like all of them want to make when you look at the surveys. But they need to learn that progression and have those skills and those types of knowledge so they can progress. And the data is showing that those kids are going to have 13 to 14 different careers now by the time they graduate by 2030, and that they're going to. And we're training for jobs, about 10 to 13 million jobs that currently don't exist that will exist in 2028. I don't know if that scares you as an educator, but you're trying to be Nostradamus and figure out what's going to happen in 10 years. I would have won the lottery 10 times right now, so, and those types of things. So, yeah, but it's all exciting time because I think there's a shift in the way thinking is going on, but it's just going to come down to semantics and how we present it and making sure we're aligned to community and student needs.
And I think Dr. Diaz makes a good point, at least with the current administration, weighing school grades on park testing as plays into that.
Yep.
And if a kid knows, well, I have to take park once, and, whether I do good on it or not is not an
Yeah.
issue because I've got another route to pass to graduation,
Yep.
that's a concern, but that might be something too that kind of changes once the new
Administration.
governor or
Yeah.
administration is in place.
Because the other part, states that have gone to this, I came from one, Ohio, and I came from two actually, Ohio and Alaska both. They actually put career readiness indicators as part of the school performance level, and they weighted the same as the park test. So if a kid got an industry recognized credential in welding, that was the same as passing a park test. And if they got multiple credentials, you can count that kid 3 times. As opposed to park, you just count them in each of the subject areas that they test. So there's ways to do it, and I'm going to be interested to see how this rolls out from the state when it comes to school accountability. But all the other states have made it value added, meaning that all these credentials and like that goes on to the school grade card, so it gives you more incentive to push those kids in the right direction instead of trying to make everybody college ready, which is what the park tries to do. I mean, well, obviously we're college and career ready. We got a career readiness indicator as part of our school grade card right now. But I think the way that looks is going to change drastically when they start going down this road and start examining all these options. Because if you look at the latest numbers, 66% of students in New Mexico do not go into college upon high school graduation. And this is only public school numbers. So about 66 to 67% of our kids are not going to college when they graduate high school. So what are we doing with those kids when they leave? So they're either leaving for 2 years and coming back in, or they're going out to try to find employment in a job market right now that's not employed. And the other part to this as well, that's only public numbers, and of those 34%, you're looking at about 50 to 55% are being remediated or either dropping out at the end of their freshman year as they're going in. So it's a huge problem for the post-secondary institutions in this state when it comes to funding, because they don't get financial aid money for remedial classes. So everybody's aware of this and trying to figure out how to get the kids. So the Western New Mexico conversations have been very productive when it comes to applied technology into career trades and those types of things, because they see the impact on their bottom line with the amount of remediation they have to do, and the loss of financial aid hours that those kids don't get because they're being remediated when they come in and their timeline starts ticking. They have 6 years to finish their program. Now after remediation, they have 5 or 5.5, maybe even 4. They may have to go through 2 years. So that's a serious problem for this state post-secondary education.
Which leads me to another question, kind of along the lines of graduation requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Are these requirements that have just been finalized, is it just for alternative?
We have to get into that to see what exactly it says, because there was mention of the testing requirement, but I don't think the course requirement has changed. But you might get more flexibility as a local board to adapt to. You'll still have to have the same amount of science, math, English, social studies basis, but you might be able to take some of those electives like welding math or business math and count them as a math credit as opposed to strictly an elective. So they're going to try to do more career specific. So once we get into guts, I'll give a full report to the board. We do have some time to look at this. This is why we're being very methodic. But we have really 4 years to make sure we have the graduation requirements lined up, because this is for the class of 2022. So we can make sure that we have it right, and we can go through the process and make sure we're doing what's best for the kids and have those things all.
Because that's a concern that I hear
Yeah.
over and over again, is those kids that do want to go to college, they're not
Yeah.
ready for college. Like, as
Yeah.
you mentioned, they've gone through remedial programs.
Yeah,
And we as a district, are we just doing the minimum for graduation requirements?
no, we're actually
requiring
above the
minimum?
state minimum right now with
Okay.
what we have, with the number of electives we have our kids. But I think what we might want to look at as a possibility is, we know we have the mandatory required, but if the kid is really going to look at going in a career pathway, we require them to have 2 or 3 credits in that career pathway, so we make sure they are proficient. Plus, that will help us when it comes to federal reporting. If a kid is a concentrator completer for our Perkins grant, it gives us more leverage to ask the state for more money in those career and tech ed programs to be funded. And maybe they'll actually bring up some of that money from a regular ed program and start putting them in these programs. So once we get into intricacies of all that, I think we can do it, because based on my experiences working with career and tech ed for the last 17 years, those kids on the national average that have taken at least 2 career and technical education classes in their high school graduate at a 94% rate. And they are about a 10% higher placement than the national average. So it's 78% nationally for high school graduates that go into college. Right now, it's 88 to 89% of those kids going into a 2- and 4-year degree that have a career and tech ed background. If you look at national numbers, state of New Mexico, we're a little bit lower because our graduation rate's a little bit lower, but they still followed the same trend. Those kids that have doing the applied learning in their career field, they're more likely to graduate than those that don't. And they're following that's been a national trend, and Department of Labor and the Perkins program has this data for the 35 years, I think it's 35 now. It's gone through 6 versions now. But it has 35 to 40 years of data back, and it's showing that these kids that are in those fields are more likely to graduate and be successful after high school graduation.
That's good data. Along his same lines, I think we do provide, let's talk for the kids that are going to college. There are still some.
Yeah.
Do we have an ACT prep class? Do we know what our average ACT score is? Are we?
I don't have access to that yet, but I know Mr. Coker has. We've had conversations about that. We don't plan on reducing AP as part of this. Actually, we might be able to offer AP classes that are career tech ed specific in some of these areas, like computer tech. There's an AP computer A and B class that we could probably incorporate in our curriculum. We're not looking at eliminating those programs.
Right.
We are looking at trying to actually encourage kids to take those more rigorous classes so they're more ready to go into college, have multiple options as they go. And I think this is all part of our strategic plan as we look at this, making sure we're offering classes to kids. We just don't want to offer an AP class for a kid that's not going to take it. Our AP biology and English classes right now are pretty good, from my understanding. And the other part that we really want to look at is how do we increase those opportunities for our kids out in Cliff too. Can we do it virtually? Can we do other means? So, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts to this, and as a district, we need to be very methodical and make sure we're addressing the needs of our kids first.
If I may clarify something, Dr. Diaz's question about the funding, the park scores do not directly affect the SEG, but the below-the-line funding, it can potentially affect. For example, Silver Schools has applied for different various grants, and we were not allowed to receive funding or qualify because our student achievement scores were too high. So below-the-line funding, it can affect, but the SEG, it shouldn't affect.
Okay.
It could, the priority schools program would probably be one that could impact us. Depending on what our student achievement levels are in title, if those are geared towards low achieving students. So that if we get off title, I mean, that'd be great because that means our kids are achieving at a high level. But I think those are the issues we look at. I mean, it's mostly probably the supplemental grant funding. Well, that'd be a good problem to have if we lose title money, but I'm not sure if Michelle would like that problem. But I think those are
It's
some
really
of
working for you. You don't need funding for it now.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think those are some of the things. That's the way it works. I mean, That's why some districts across this country don't take a dime of federal dollars, because there's so many strings attached to it. And they're starting to see a trend of that nationally across too, with that, so.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the legislative session, a new administration,
Mhm.
because of the lawsuit too that was
Yeah, underfunded.
underfunded education, and so we'll see.
That's right.
Lots of changes.
Other questions, comments for Mr. Clough?
Well, I guess I have one. Just one. This is sort of tied to this stuff, but, well, I was just curious if down the road you're going to entertain the 5-point grading system. But we don't have to go into that tonight, but
It's been talked about. I'm not sure where we're at in that process because of
that's
this new
fine.
shift, but
Okay.
it's a conversation that has been brought up by a couple of my administrators,
Okay, thank you.
so,
Still want to make sure it's on the table.
yeah.
Other questions, comments? Thank you, Mr. Clough.
Well, you get to put up with me again too, because I'm
I'm gonna
Michelle
say, all
too.
right. Are you going to stay put for
Yeah.
Mrs. McCain's report?
Yeah. Unfortunately, Miss McCain could not attend this evening because of an illness, so she forwarded me her report to let you know on the budget adjustments that are being requested by the board. Okay, the first adjustment is to our dual credit instructional materials. Those are for the textbooks for our students that are enrolled with the WNMU programs. So there's an adjustment made to there. The IDEA preschool grant is the carryover from last year that we had remaining from the startup of the grant. And then this year's final allocation for a 17-18 amount of $3,309.55. And that helps fund some of the special education classroom personnel that's in there. So that way you guys are aware of that. And then the RDA results-driven accountability grant that we're eligible for, $52,000 have come forward for that. And that helps elementary reading achievement in students. That helps us provide professional development, coaching, technical assistance, and additional funds to support the school improvement for targeted to our early elementary reading achievement. So it's aimed at our younger kids to do that. And then there are several donations that are put in there, one for $850 from the FMP matching gifts to La Plata. And then there's a $10,000 allocation from Freeport-McMoran that they give us annually that's not specified. So that donation is divided up between the schools based on student population for the allocation and is used at the discretion of our students to benefit. So some of the examples of that is like La Plata does buy some backpacks and like that for students that are in need. I know shoes have been bought in the past for students. So those discretionary funds are used for student needs across the district when needed, and that comes directly from that grant as being discretionary. And Michelle told me at the bottom of her email, if I don't know the answers, take the questions, and she will answer them for me tomorrow.
Questions for Mrs. McCain via Mr. Clough? Seeing none, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda this evening is Board of Education, and first up is the Finance Subcommittee reports.
Okay. Mr. Khan and I met with Michelle and Martha Alvarez Wednesday. It was a little earlier. We went over the where we sit currently as budgeted, and most things are encumbered. So things are settling down in the hiring. As of last week, still just very little turnover. We are at a projected 2.52% carryover. And again, she said, things are popping up that were not foreseen, not really affecting operational, but for example, they're having to put in cement barriers at the pre-K, and so that's going to use up some of our HB 33 or SB 9 monies. Things just happen, and there's stuff that you can't foresee. So we talked about the bond monies. Most of them are encumbered into the projects that are currently getting started and going. You'll see that the daycare is fenced off. They're doing some samples in the ground or something, she said. And then out at Harrison, they are trying to get that stuff ready to go too. So most of that is encumbered, meaning that we have a pretty good projection that those projects are going to use those monies. Is there anything else that you can think of?
It's just with the cash balances, so this will hopefully pick up within the next couple months to know where we're actually at percentage-wise.
Right. She said that what Patrick is referring to is because we haven't had our audit done, there was obviously a cash carryover balance from last year. Once the audit is completed and it's approved by the state, that cash balance could then be budgeted, which would help that percentage of budget. So it would bring the 2.52 up. So we can't budget that until the audit is done and we have budget authority over that. So yeah, very good point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very well. Questions for the Finance Subcommittee? Thank you all for their reports. Next up is the Safety and Security Subcommittee report, which I think we need to change the name. I think you had requested
Threat Assessment Committee.
Assessment Committee. Mr. Flores, anything to report from Threat Assessment?
Yes, sir. We met today, and it's the first meeting of the year. We just went over some of the little issues that we may be having with the buzzer system, the camera system, just little glitches that need to be worked out. Overall, it does creates more of a safety barrier for people wanting to get into the school. And I know that we talked about it this afternoon, but we're trying to do things in layers that we've discussed before. And obviously the armed security guards were part of that layer, but we have to do baby steps. And we are making progression every time we do a phase. The parents are understandably patient with this because there's a timing issue with pressing the buzzer, pulling the door open, but I think it does act as a deterrent. And I think for the most part, parents know that we are trying our best to ensure the safety of the students in the schools. We did discuss about changing the name today to Threat Assessment Committee. And I think that's probably it in a nutshell. Am I correct, Mr. Brown?
Yes, sir. That pretty well summarizes it.
We're going to meet again next month just to go over I know some people couldn't make it today, but just to go over any possible situations or threats at schools, or just keep everybody apprised of our current situation.
Very well. Questions, comments?
I have a question. I know we had talked about that app that was out there, or the anonymous
Stop It.
reporting. Yeah.
We discussed that today as well. And according to Rusty, the Stop It app that they use right now is going to end in December. But there's going to be another app that replaces that. Is that correct, Ben? Yeah. And we discussed that at length, the reporting app. The reports that have been received are just sort of test reports. Someone's sent in a report, has gone to the principal calls them, and they just said, we just want to make sure the app works. But there has been nothing of significance being reported, but the app is operational. And there was some talk as well that we may need to get some way to let the parents know, whether through email or through letters, that the app is not just for students. The app is for anybody that needs to report an incident, whether it be bullying, a safety issue, a problem with a teacher. Anybody can have access to that app. And I think that's where we're lacking a little bit. It lacks a good word for it, but we did discuss that today.
So there has been a notification to students though and staff and
That's correct, yes.
regarding
The accessibility to it,
Yeah.
yes.
I was
Did you
just
wanna-
curious, because one of the things that tied into that in my mind was, we're trying to see at-risk students, and so it's not just in my mind, a tattletale app, but if someone looks like they're in trouble, I'm really worried about so-and-so, but I don't want to be the one to report them. I'm worried they're suicidal, or I'm worried, but you don't want to put yourself out there to make that accusation. At least a counselor could bring that student in.
Absolutely.
And to me, that's the bigger use for the app than even, me, I hate the
Bullying,
punitive
yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
No, that is available.
And so that app will be ending, because I think we just had like a year that was free or
That's
something, or
correct.
trial.
Yeah, according to Rusty, it ends in December.
And we'll be getting a
There'll
different
be
one, or
something
renewing it.
ready to replace it.
Okay. Very well. Any other questions?
No, sir.
Comments? All right. Next,
Just let me add to yours, Dr. Diaz. We did discuss, though, too, there has to be a proper reporting mechanism and documentation. When somebody does get that report, who received it and what did that person do with it? Whether they sent it to the Threat Assessment Committee or the Crisis Intervention Committee or the counselor. And then that complainant needs to be contacted probably within 24 hours as to what the action plan or the solution to that problem is going to be. So that's when, if it's an emergency meeting, the threat assessment team can meet in an emergency and come up with an action plan to give a solution to that problem, or to give the resources to a student that needs help counseling. We'll address it right away. And that's how we operate at Western. I shared an incident with the committee this morning of how we addressed it through the reporting mechanism. And the person that reported was very pleased with the promptness and in the manner in which we handled it. But we have to document who gets it and what they do with it, because as we discussed today, if you get it and you say, why, I referred it to them being who, and them doesn't not know that they received it, we have a problem. So that's why every person that receives it will document it, and each school will keep their documentation of the reports that they receive.
So who is receiving those messages currently?
Well, according to Rusty, it's the principals of each school
That's correct.
that the incident is reported at are the ones receiving the reports. Ideally, it should be at least 2 or 3 people, because if the principal is out of town or on an assignment or something, somebody else should get the app in case of his presence, and especially when it's a true emergency and it needs to be addressed immediately.
it's interesting that the kids have tried it just to see if it
Really works.
works, or if.
And I don't know if
some
it was the
action.
kids or staff, it wasn't told, but it was told it was a couple times. Is that correct, Mr. Brown?
Yes, sir.
And when they reached out, they just wanted to make sure that it worked, which it did.
Good.
That's good. Thank you. Next on our agenda this evening is Board President, and we have, again, a number of New Mexico School Board Association Policy Service Advisories this evening for a first reading. And so we'll start off with, there was a correction to one of the, and I guess I should back up, the policy service advisories are numbered 158 through 163. And also 164 and 165. There was, in your board packet, there was a correction to policy 160. I'll go through each of these individually and read them by name for our first reading. The first policy is Policy Advisory 158. It's report cards and progress reports. The second policy for a first reading is Policy 159. It is parent conferences literary proficiency notification and conference. The third policy for a first reading is Policy 160, IKE, promotion and retention students. The fourth policy for a first reading is number 161, and that's policy IKEB, acceleration/IKEB-R, acceleration. The fifth policy for a first reading is policy 162, IKF, graduation requirements. The sixth policy for a first reading is policy 163. It's titled JG, assignment of students to classes and grade levels /JG-R, assignment of students to classes and grade levels. The seventh policy for a first reading is policy advisory 164, and it's titled GCH, professional staff and training. And the eighth policy for a first reading is policy 165. It's titled JFABD, admission of homeless students /JFABD-R, admission of homeless students /JFABD/EA, admission of homeless students. Those are our policy advisories for a first reading. On here we have also number 9, Linda, is it October 15, 2018 board meeting? Is that something that was, I didn't catch that before in the agenda. Oh, that was the, I needed to, I'm sorry, that's not a policy, that's just a notation that our next board meeting is scheduled during fall break, and we wanted to discuss changing that. So if we look at our calendars, October 15th was the third Monday, which is our regular scheduled board meeting, which lands on fall break, and so we want to look at moving that to potentially, I was thinking the 22nd of the month. Board members, does that work with your schedule? Does everybody, what are your thoughts on moving that off of the fall break week to the October 22nd for our work session and regular meeting?
I'm good with it.
That works.
Everybody's good?
Mhm.
So we'll do that. We'll change that meeting in October. Sorry, it took me a while to remember, why is this on here? Next are board comments, and I'll go first. Kind of quickly, Silver Cobra football game and Spirit Week was this last week. I think from what I heard, most everything went off without much incidents outside of the spirit and the competition at the game. So that's always good to hear, or I haven't heard yet. So congratulations to everybody that participated in that. Another thing that I want to mention is the Legislative Finance Committee is going to host an interim committee meeting here in Silver City. It's next week, and I've got agendas that I'll pass out if everybody, I don't know that the rest of the board has seen those agendas or not. The LFC did invite Silver Schools and the Deming Schools to participate in a panel. Everybody get one of those? One more?
I have the agenda. They gave it to us at the university.
Okay. So on Wednesday morning, the committee will meet up at Western's Miller Library, I believe. Thursday morning, Silver and Deming Schools are scheduled to participate in, I believe it's a panel discussion, kind of update to the LFC. Mr. Brown, I believe you mentioned you were going to be out of town. Is that correct?
I'm going to try to get back.
You're going to try and get back, okay.
But if not, Mr. Clough's going to be there.
Mr. Clough will be there. Was Mrs. McCain was also going to be there?
Yes, sir. She's going to be there as well.
So I'll be there, but probably be punting or deferring most questions to the expert witnesses, Mr. Clough and Mrs. McCain. But I wanted to make everybody else aware of that meeting that's going on the morning, Thursday the 27th. And you can see there also, they'll be going down to Deming, I think, the following day. And then also on the, did they put it on here? On Tuesday afternoon, it's not on this agenda, but Tuesday afternoon, they requested to visit the pre-K. Apparently, they had heard good things from Secretary Designate of Education about the pre-K when he visited. And so several members wanted to visit the pre-K. And so that's been arranged. I believe it's at 1:30
Yes, sir.
on Tuesday afternoon. Again, if board members, if you're available and you want to attend, my understanding is just going to be kind of a tour of the facility. And then the same on Wednesday. If you're available and you want to attend that LFC meeting, I think that would be great. What else on LFC? Anything else on LFC that
I can think.
just wanted to make everybody aware of that meeting that's going to take place. The other thing, I guess, is kind of more of a question or slash concern. We brought it up about the pre-K was when I drive by there at particular days, I think it's drop-off and pickup times. It seems like parking is kind of crazy, and there's people that are parked up Swan, they're parked up the side street. And so I just didn't know if there something else we could do to maybe ensure a little bit better, I guess, organization with the drop-off. I know it's pretty difficult there because the bus barn entrance kind of takes up some of that space, but that was just something I've recognized in the last, since school started, and it seems kind of parents are parking all over the place and running kids across the street. Just want to make sure everybody's safe when they're trying to drop off their kids and pick them up. And I think that's all the comments I've got for this evening. I'll kick to Mrs. Montenegro.
All right, so it's middle of September. It seems to be going fast. Let's see. Obviously, the Cobra Silver game was exciting to get that crown back. Way to go, Silver football. Lots of people participated. They shared pictures, cheer, dance, band. It was just an all-out fun week. It always is. And good competition, good wholesome competition. It's always fun in a house where one's a fighting Colt and the other one's a Cobra Indian, so that's always fun. I would just say from what I've seen at the schools, lots of positive, encouraging, just teachers that are excited to teach and kids that are excited to learn. Something that's been a great addition, and I don't know how it is at other schools, is extra PE time at Jose Barrios is happening, which is my son's favorite subject. So that's a big deal. PE days are awesome. And the teachers really, really appreciate that we've given, extra PE time because it's important for the kids to not only be able to be physical, but also to be able to have some time to use that other side of their brain. So that's a really neat thing. Also, the different electives available to the sixth graders, teachers sharing kids at the sixth grade level. It's just been really interesting to see how we're making that adjustment work on a first-hand basis with my child. So lots of really positive things happening in Silver schools, and it's different not to have anyone at the middle school or the high school, but I'm so glad that a lot of my fellow board members have it there, so I just feel like we get a really good grasp of what's going on throughout the district, district-wide. So that's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Khan.
I just want to mention, it's already, like Ashley said, we're almost done with September. It was good competition between Silver and Cobra. It was good to see a lot of the just intertwined, which I've never seen before between like the mascots and just everybody in general. It was really good as for the past, I won't mention. It was good to see a lot of silver fans cheering on the football team, etc. I did attend the Jose Barrios with Secretary Rakowski, did I pronounce his name right? So that was great to attend, really great with the children, and he did give me one comment, and it just really, he did throw out about Mr. Brown. He had a high, he talked very highly about you, and he said we were very lucky to have you lead our district, which made me feel very proud. So again, I want to thank the prior board members before my tenure, for bringing you aboard. Thank you. Like I said, we are very lucky to have you in our district. I also want to just thank Miss Marnie. I don't know if we've thanked her or anything, but she's out there for every sporting event, activity, taking pictures, and she just lets us know as parents what's going on. So I want to appreciate Miss Marnie for everything that she does. Other than that, I don't want to think that Christmas is almost coming. I'd rather think about fall break, but.
Yeah, let's stay there.
Decorations are going up in Walmart
Yeah.
already.
Are they really?
Mhm.
Oh, good.
Other than that, that's all I have.
Thank you. Dr. Gibbs?
I would just say the year is going extremely fast, as we knew it would. And it's been an exciting start. Like I said, a whole new vibe, definitely super positive, and I think we're heading in the right direction. I have to say hats off to the Silver High staff. Now I have a freshman daughter, and I will just say she's involved in a lot of extracurriculars, currently volleyball, which she is just enjoying. And they're getting off to a good start. The thing I would just say, kudos to the faculty there. They have been willing to meet their students before school, at lunchtime, after school, all different hours, and they've been really good about communicating and just trying to make it flexible for students to make up that work. And that's their time they give up. When they come in early to meet a student, that's on their time. They give up their lunch, that's on their time. So it's not just one of her teachers, it's really multiple teachers really trying to work with her and be proactive about making sure her academic experience is good, even if she's missing certain things. And it is really, from a parent perspective, it's much appreciated. Much appreciated. So I really want to recognize the Silver High staff for that. I've been really impressed and grateful. The second thing I'd say is I have to use this time here because it's the only time I have a microphone this week. But my daughter's turning 15 Wednesday and my husband's turning 50 Thursday. So I will have a first grader, a 15-year-old, and a 50-year-old in the house. So super excited about this week, but still seeing great things again at Stout. And I think everybody's just trying to work to make our kids' learning experience, especially the academic side, but all of the extracurriculars as well, a great experience. And I see that our band does so much, and they make it's really, you don't have the same experience when you don't have your band there. So when they went to the Kobe Silver game, or it's all those elements that come together that make it such a neat experience for our kids. And so everybody plays a role in that, and I am so ever grateful. And I'm glad you brought up Marnie, because I traveled to El Paso this last week, and a lot of parents couldn't make that trip, but there's Marnie taking the pictures, posting it, taking the pictures. And so I think we've got an all-star crew together, and things are coming together, heading in the right direction. And I thank everybody who plays a role in that for their hard work.
Thank you. Mr. Flores?
I wasn't going to really say anything, but I want to echo Mr. Khan's comments about attending the event at 6th Street with the Secretary of Education. He did echo the same sentiment to me about Audie Brown, and he said that we are privileged to have him, and I agree, because he has shown some excellent leadership abilities here at the district, and we're very happy to have him. And he did speak very, very highly to me as well. And again, echo Dr. Diaz and Mr. Khan with Marnie, because you could be having a bad day, and if you just talk to her for 10 seconds, she'll make you feel so much better. And I first met her when my kids were going to school at Harrison, and I don't know if she's been given the recognition or the accolades that she deserves, but driving the bus, obviously she knows all the kids by name. She greets all the kids by name with a smile, always giving them positive comments, regardless of what kid it is. I've seen her in at Tier C, the same thing, Socorro, all these places. I think she should be given an opportunity to teach everyone at Silver Schools about customer service, because she truly greets everyone with a smile, whether she's having a bad day or not, and she makes that person feel very, very special. That's all I have.
Thank you, and I think we have a great person to celebrate with next month with cake.
Yeah.
I think that's a good suggestion, I think.
We could have a monthly recognition.
And then there was one.
I'm serious.
There was one comment there saying, "Well, we hope Silver Schools didn't pay for that native air flight for the." And I said, "No, I believe that was donation
For what?
for the
The football?
From Silver.
the mascot ride from."
I think it was donated.
I can verify it was donated. They approached Mr. Oaxaca, myself, and Mr. Brown at the parent meeting night, said it'd be cool, and we gave them the consent to go ahead. They fully donated those services. We can't tell them enough, thank you.
That's so cool.
Yep, that was
We almost
pretty
had a
neat.
decapitated colt coming out of the helicopter. That was a different story, so that's,
But I will agree with the comments about Miss Marnie. She always greets the kids by name with a smile, usually with a hug as well. And I think we've got
She's
a
awesome.
person to maybe celebrate with next month.
Absolutely.
So thanks for that
The
recommendation.
football game.
Absolutely.
Very well. Next on our agenda this evening is our consent agenda. Oh, no, I'm sorry, open public comment. Mrs. Hernandez, do you have any requests for public comment?
I don't.
Thank you. Then moving along to our consent agenda is our next action item. Our next item and action items are the consent agenda A, budget, finance, purchasing, the A, financial reports, check listing report, the deposit listing report, fiscal year to date, operational expenditure roll-up reports, consolidated board report, and the procurement card payment report are all in your board books. Total amount of checks written for August. And Mr. Clough, do you have that total amount for our approval?
I do not.
It is,
Thank you.
thank you, Mrs. Hernandez, $1,055,173.58.
Yep.
There's the total amounts for approval for August. And then we did already review our, under B, budget adjustment requests. Mr. Clough reviewed those with us. I don't believe we have any items under C, awards of bids or proposals, but we do have item D, donations. The donation to La Plata from Freeport McMoran in the amount of, if anybody can help me with it.
850.
850, thank you. So I'm trying to blow that up so I can see it. I turned 50 this year as well. And then also the additional donation from Freeport in the amount of $10,000. So thank you for those donations from Freeport. And I don't believe we have any items under E, conflict of interest disclosures. So with that, any questions, comments for Mr. Clough regarding our consent items 1A, B, and D? No questions, comments? I'll entertain, very well, then I'll entertain a motion to approve our consent agenda 1A, B, and D.
So moved.
Got a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Got a second. Any discussion? Mr. Clough, please pass on our regards to Mrs. McCain for a speedy recovery, and then we missed her here.
I will text her that right now.
We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving our consent agenda item 1A, B, and D signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Next up for consent agenda is number 2, transportation. And we have a list of August bus drivers with some modifications to that in everybody's packet. And then also August per capita feeder routes list or updates in your packet as well. Mr. Clough or Mr. Brown, do you have any additional information on those items?
No, just that from Ms. Estrada, that this could be a monthly thing with the bus drivers because they keep changing them over, and we're required to have all new bus drivers approved. So this will probably be a regular, and with the feeder routes, as we drop students and add students, sometimes it puts people out the allowable allowance because they're constantly adjusting bus routes. So just be aware of that when you're doing this, as we're trying to service this the best. And sometimes paying the people to get them to a point is cheaper than us actually running a bus route out to get them. And sometimes our buses can't get to those areas.
Any questions or comments from the board? Very well, I'll entertain a motion to approve our consent agenda item 2A, bus drivers, and C, feeder routes.
I so move.
Got a motion, do we have a second?
Second?
Got a motion and a second, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Next on our agenda this evening is an individual action item B, consideration and approval of joining the Southwest Regional Education Cooperative number 10. And during our work session, we had the information presented to us on joining that cooperative. Any questions or comments from the board on that?
I guess the only thing that we didn't ask was if we can get out of it, which I'm sure we can.
It's
in
a
the event-
yearly renewal.
Oh, yeah, in the event that it's not beneficial. Unlikely event, I should say.
Yeah.
Further questions or comments?
Yes, sir.
Very well, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consideration and approval of joining the Southwest Regional Education Cooperative number 10. I'll move to approve that. Our motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Next on our agenda is future meetings and proposed agenda items. As discussed a little bit earlier, our next scheduled work session and regular board meeting was, or would have been, the 15th of October, but we have, looks like everybody's schedule is clear on the 22nd, so we will be meeting on the 22nd next month. The region meeting is this Tuesday, next Tuesday. And I believe Dr. Diaz and Mr. Flores, are you signed up to go scout for elk on that road trip to Camado?
Yes, sir.
Very well.
I'm looking, he's shooting.
Are you guys just gonna take one of your personal vehicles, or do you want? Are you
I told him I'd go if he put the siren on.
Siren on?
Yeah.
Perfect.
I may sign up late.
Fortunately, I've never been in a car with the siren to date.
In the back
Dr.
seat.
Diaz, make sure you're in the front seat if that happens too. just
All
in
right,
case.
yeah.
Paparazzi.
I don't know what the conditions of the rain.
Conditions are you bring snacks.
I told you I had that covered.
Fill your pockets before you leave here tonight.
I know.
Should be very entertaining.
Moving on, the annual convention dates are December 7th and 8th, 2018, for the New Mexico School Board Association. That's in Albuquerque. Next on our agenda this evening is open public comment. Mrs. Hernandez, do you have any requests to speak before the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to executive session, closed pursuant to 10-15-1, H2 through H9, NMSA 1978, AH2 limited personnel matter staffing. 1, the superintendent can update the board, and legal counsel can advise regarding the investigations of certified and classified employees by the superintendent. Remedial compensatory efforts related to the same and specific employee movements. And 2, legal counsel can inform and advise the board regarding status of a request for a discharge hearing. And then B, H2, limited personnel matters, superintendent evaluation. So I believe we do have reason to go to executive session for these items. Mrs. Hernandez, if you will conduct a roll call to go into executive session.
Mr. McMillan?
Yes?
Mrs. Montenegro?
Yes.
Mr. Khan?
Yes.
Dr. Diaz?
Yes.
And Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Very well, the time's 7:58. We'll go into executive session. Take a few minutes to take a break, grab some more finger foods.
Mr. McMillan?